for coming out. I know some of you were here yesterday and have come back, so that's good. We didn't scare you away yesterday. So I really appreciate you being here. In fact, a lot of people were here yesterday and are back, so we really appreciate that. So you've already, for anybody that wasn't here yesterday, my pleasure to introduce David Holder from Clarity of Place. David's firm has been putting together this plan, doing the research. We've been working with them since last fall. It's been a great experience, and so we're happy to provide a deeper dive into the research that is behind the plan and the recommendations in it. So with that, I'm just going to let David take it over.
Perfect. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to warn you in advance. This is my last presentation because my voice is about this close to being gone. And I apologize for that. My voice isn't normally something that's nice to listen to anyway. Just ask my kids. But we'll get through this together. I'm also going to apologize. This is a deep dive into some of the surveys we did around this and some of the data that we worked through as we were analyzing all of the different inputs that went into the plan. And it's a lot. It's one of the reasons we didn't want to go into this yesterday, because it's almost overkill in terms of the information that's there. We did pass out the full plan, including the appendices. All of this is in there as an appendix. So you can see those actual charts. You can see all of those graphics. They're all part of that. The other side of this, I've tried to blow up all of this information as big as possible, but it's still tough to see some of this. If you do have trouble seeing, please feel free and comfortable to move up and take a closer look. I don't even care if you come up and stand beside me, that's fine. Because I have trouble seeing some of this, but I did try to get everything as big as I could possibly get it. Is it Dave? Yeah. That we took your advice yesterday, and we did put some of those slides into a little different format. It's still not perfect, but it'll give you that good cross comparison of what some of those things are going to show. So, and that's one of the things I wanted to walk away with. What you have in front of you is not the finished product. We've already taken some of the information and feedback that we got yesterday. We're going to go back next week. We're going to send a new and revised version that has a few new things in it to the Hocking Hills Tourism Association. So there's another version of this coming. And we've even gotten some new data while we've been here that helps us see things. It's not going to change the direction of the plan, but it does at least give us some better information to include in the plan. The last thing I'm going to say is, as we go through some of these different points, please ask questions. You're going to hear from the survey that we did to our residents, the survey that we did to our stakeholders. I'll show it all up there. And the input that went into this helped us build the plan. And a number of you were not here yesterday to hear the recommendations. And I want to real quickly boil those down into 4 different areas. One of the key recommendations, and it does come back to a big piece of this, is about communication across the community. And getting organizations, getting our residents and our businesses, all giving them chances to talk to one another and really discuss ways to solve some of these problems. Because some of the policy-related problems that are causing some of these destination stewardship challenges, they can't be solved by a single organization. So working together, working collaboratively, being focused on solutions and problem solving together helps us move things forward. So there is some recommendations around how to do that. There are also 3 key recommendation areas that fall directly on the shoulders of the Hocking Hills Tourism Association. The first one of those is continuing to focus on overnight travel at times of the year and days of the week that we need that business. You're going to see some graphics in terms of trends, travel trends to the area. We are really high when it's a weekend, and we are really low when it's not. And that's a challenge. There are some recommendations around helping with visitor behavior. When our visitors come here, how do we engage them to help them really take care of our trails and take care of our destination? This is where we live. We need our residents to have that respect and care for it also. One aspect of that is encouraging the continuation of shuttling, offering park and ride from here to the park, focusing on getting some of that visitor traffic off the roads, and you're going to see one of the reasons that's so important in just a few minutes. There are also a number of recommendations around convening these conversations and really focusing on engagements like this, where we're getting the community together. We're not talking about the problem, we're talking about solutions, and we're beginning to develop that way of moving things forward. So there's a lot of focus on the role that the association has to play in terms of convening. The last area is really about communications and making certain that we're communicating the value of tourism and what its importance to this community, but not whitewashing it. We have to acknowledge there are some challenges that come along with that, and you're going to see a lot of those challenges illustrated in today's, and it's affecting people's reality, and it's affecting people's way of life, and that's not what we're looking for here. So we showed this yesterday. This is the clear understanding of what's going on here, and it's not easy. There's a number of different pieces to this that are not easy to collect. So we're having to almost piece some of this information together to give you an accurate picture. We're using that accurate picture to build those recommendations that you saw. So this is kind of the behind the curtain piece. In other words, you're seeing how the sausage is being made. We're going to pull back the curtain and show you some of the data. I'm going to continue to focus in on this, that this is all about destination stewardship. It's about protecting and preserving and promoting the long-term viability of the tourism industry and making certain that the industry has a net positive impact on this community. Right now, it's out of balance. We need to get that balance a little bit better controlled. And it's out of balance in so many different ways, which you're going to see. I'm going to start here with this historic picture. I don't know when this was, this map of Hocking County, Ohio's scenic wonderland, but it's old, and it's more evidence of Hocking County has been a destination for years and years and years. However, over the past several years, that notion of being a destination changed dramatically. It changed because of the pandemic. It also changed because of the growth of Columbus. It's going to change more, and we're not prepared for that change right now. As Intel continues to put in their operation in the Columbus area, and more businesses come in to help support that, more residents are going to follow. That's going to change our place even more. And one of the incidences of that is in terms of our day trip traffic does not show any signs of slowing down. And it is what's causing so many challenges on those weekend nights or weekend days, and part of the reason we're having this conversation. Because it's impacting our roadways. And this was looking at the calendar year of 2023, and you see so much emphasis on the route to the state park. That red line is the highest amount of traffic that these roads are seeing. 664. But you also see that the orange line is the next highest, and that's the line that's getting people to this area. But once they're here, they're just congesting that main artery. What? Let's see. With the yellow line going to Gibsonville? Gabisonville. I can't see the slides. So, and again, so this information comes to us through geolocation tracking, being able to track people's cell phones. It's not fully accurate. I'm going to tell you that right now. It's not fully accurate. This gives us a sense of what's happening. I wouldn't fully trust that the numbers are 100 or even 80% accurate, though. This number, or this image, is accurate for when it was taken, and it is the destination assets that you have here in Hocking County. The little red dots are your attractions. They're the things that people want to see and do when they come here. The blue dots are short-term rentals. We had an individual with the county here in our earlier session this morning, and he looked at that and he goes, I have another version of that that's more current, and there are more blue dots. So it's part of the problem, and it's one of the challenges that we have with housing. It's one of the challenges that you encounter. You mentioned this yesterday with how am I supposed to get more industries here but when there's no land because it's being consumed by short-term rentals? No, there's no workforce. It's all of these different challenges. We did look at it one step further, and in terms of our lodging property, we are very heavily unbalanced on how much of that is in the form of cabins or large cabins. Excuse me. 64% of our lodging classifies themselves as a cabin or a house. 31% classifies itself as a large cabin. Can you guys see? I can slide over just a little bit more. Comparatively speaking, and we're going to show you some comparisons with other places. It's off center, but it's reality of what you have here. Only 4% classifies themselves as a hotel or a lodge or an inn. We have seen hotel growth largely since 2017. Some of that hotel growth has been in the category of upscale, but we have a lot of mid-scale properties that operate in this area. And so it's just another dynamic of this is what we are. This is what we have right now. So how do we think about what that means? And one of the ways we think about what it means is to look at it comparatively to other places. And we subjectively chose these 4 destinations to compare the Hocking Hills to because they each have very close access to either state park land or national park land. In fact, Estes Park and Gatlinburg, you literally can walk from the community into the park. So there are some similarities, and there are also some dramatic differences. Logan, of these 5 communities, Logan is probably the farthest from its park, followed closely by Fredericksburg, Texas. I'm not sure has anyone been to Fredericksburg, Texas? It's not Big Bend. It's in the hill country of Texas. It's about an hour from San Antonio, an hour and 15 minutes from Austin. So you've got 2 major population centers, growing population centers that are easily accessible. Their day trip traffic has gone crazy. Their park is a big orange rock called Enchanted Rock. And you get there, you hike to the top, you sweat like crazy because it's Texas. And you look around and you hike back down, and then you go into this little town which has wineries and a great downtown area, and they are overwhelmed by visitors. Sedona, we talked about yesterday, for those of you who were there. Sedona is a very small town in the Red Rocks of Arizona. They're right next to Red Rocks State Park and a few other state parks. Their growth in terms of short-term rentals has been crazy. And they're again, it's just they are not able to handle what they're seeing right now. Gatlinburg is a different story all across the board. It's great. Great Smoky Mountains National Park is the #1 visited national park in the system, and it has been for years and years and years. And Gatlinburg is a small town that just somehow absorbs this, but they have so many short-term rentals, and it's certainly an impact on their marketplace. Estes Park. Estes Park saw the same level of increase happen in a little differently than we did here. Their national park is Rocky Mountain National Park. In 2021, they implemented a timed entry policy at the national park. So you have to have a timed reservation to enter the park, because they had been seeing individuals wait in their cars for an hour and a half to get through the gates. And it was causing frustration among the visitors. It was causing frustrations among the residents. They still have time periods early in the morning and much later in the evening where it's open admission. It's not open admission, you still have to pay to get in. It's open in terms of not having to have a reservation. But for the peak time period of the day, you've got to have the time in which you are going into that park. What it's done for that community is it's actually given them a way to understand the volume that they're seeing, and it's encouraged more engagement with the businesses, restaurants, and retail operators in the downtown Estes Park. And it's been more consistent. It's at a more consistent, sustainable level. It's not these gigantic peaks and valleys that I don't know how to plan for. In Hocking County, again, we looked at it from a county perspective, which doesn't compare exactly with these other communities. Estes Park is in a very large county. Gatlinburg is in the same county as Pigeon Forge, and their county picture is a very different one. But because of Logan's distance to the state park, we didn't want to put the concentration on Logan. We said, let's look at this from the county perspective. And we see that population drop that we've experienced here largely related to housing and the affordability of that. The part that I want to focus on for this is park visitation. And this is a more accurate estimate, but I'm going to tell you it's not 100% accurate, because we don't truly know. We don't have a way to truly say this is the amount of individuals that are going to that state park every single year. But we're closer now than we've ever been before, thanks to some of the data resources that Hocking Hills Tourism Association has started subscribing to. So we're giving you a range. The range is somewhere between 1.8 and 2.5 million. But the growth factor of that since 2018 is crazy. And it's one of the reasons that we're having a conversation not about direction, but about destination stewardship. If we look at that in terms of, and again, this isn't totally perfect, but it's a fairly close. I'm going to put 70 to 80% accuracy on this. In terms of where we have come from and where this looks like it's going, again, this is hard to sustain. And it's causing dramatic impacts, this increase of 121% since 2019. Most destinations use 2019 as kind of the comparison year. We know everything changed in 2020. things changed so dramatically in 2021 and 2022, it's tough to use those as a comparative year. But you can see we started a brand new cycle once that hit. But that's tough to absorb. We went one step further, and the takeaway from this, other than it looks like an EKG, is this is trend information, and it gives us a sense of how does our year look. The blue line, and you see those peaks and valleys. Those peaks are largely weekends. We do have some extended times. You can see the April time frame. That's spring break time, so we're seeing a little bit more solid week-long visits into our area. People are off, they're kind of traveling with their families. But we get into those summer months, and the peaks are so high, but they're weekends. The valleys, certainly throughout the year, are very low. That's a hard way to run a business. It's a hard way to have employment because it's so up and down. So the blue line also represents individuals who traveled less than 75 miles. There's a high likelihood these are the day trippers coming into our area. The orange lines are those individuals who traveled between 75 and 100 miles. And again, it's a little bit of a smaller group, but again, still similar peaks and valleys. There's a likelihood that many of those are staying the night, spending the night in our area. There's also a likelihood that some of them are also day travelers. Put your attention on the green line. The green line are individuals who are coming from more than 150 miles. They have to spend the night. If they're not spending the night here, they're spending the night somewhere. And it's really the target audience we need to be going after. Their peaks and valleys aren't as intense because it does give us some chances to keep them here for multiple nights, but we're still seeing those peaks and valleys. So let's get into some of the survey results. Because one of the things we wanted to get a handle on is how accurate are those peaks and valleys? And so we did two different surveys. We did a resident survey and we did a stakeholder survey. And you would ask, all right, I understand what a resident is. What is a stakeholder? Stakeholder is anyone who has some type of connection to a business, a not-for-profit, a government entity, even all the way to a church. We had a couple of individuals fill this out that were in the healthcare field. A plumber was one of our stakeholders that filled this out. So we got 153 responses from our stakeholders out of a list of, I believe the number was 450, Karen?
Yes.
So 150 filled out the survey. 54 of those were represented themselves as being in the accommodations field. I'm a campground, I'm a hotel operator, I'm a short-term rental, I operate cabins. So 54 of them were in the accommodations field. So we asked our stakeholders, looking back at 2023, this survey went out in January of this year. Was your business volume or your visitation volume the same as, less than, or more than what was 2023 less than, more than, or the same as last year? So looking at 2022. So comparing 2023 to 2022, I'm trying to confuse myself. 26% of our overall stakeholders said it was about the same. 31% said it was a decrease. 31% said it was an increase. So really across the board with that response. When we pulled the accommodation sector out, 61% said it was a decrease. We saw less visitor volume than we did in 2022. 15% said, I don't know. And that's okay. It's not saying that these businesses don't know what's going on. We didn't just ask this question of owners and higher general managers. We asked it of employees. And we did see, you're going to see that we had some individuals who may not be aware of that volume fill this out. So 61% said it was a decrease from last year. Well, that's a similar question in terms of revenue. So visitor volume was one thing. The money they spend is another thing. Again, looking at all stakeholders, pretty much a wide range. We saw individuals in all three of those categories. From the accommodation side, 52% said we saw a decrease over last year. We'll talk a little bit about why that was. We've had some individuals really put some thought into why they felt that way and some of the trends in terms of what's happened in this area. And it makes a whole lot of sense as why we saw businesses that were planning against record high numbers and not necessarily on historical trends that we've seen here because they didn't know. Please don't hurt your eyes on this because I'm going to explain this very quickly. We needed to get a sense of what is our actual accommodations occupancy that we see in this area. And occupancy is an important figure to let us know how is this performing and where do we look like we're going. For tracking a community that has so many short-term rentals, there aren't very many good, reliable data sources for this. The data sources that are out there are hit or miss. They haven't gotten it fully 100% correct yet. There are some data sources on the hotel side, but we don't have enough hotels to get that information from those sources. So this was a big question going into this process, trying to get a sense of what is the overall lodging occupancy across a year, that year being 2023, to give us some type of benchmark for going forward. So we asked the question in the survey of our accommodations, tell us what your volume has looked like, but tell us for blocks of the year. So January, February, March and April, July and August. Let's put those together. If we ask this too directly, if we said, hey, tell us what your occupancy looks like in August, historically, we're not going to get a response from that. Because I'm not sure, I don't know why you're asking me that, and I feel like you're prying. Asking it this way is a little safer, and you see, all 54 of those accommodations responded to this question. But it allowed us to go one step further and start condensing that information further. So instead of all of those big areas where you could say my range was between 20 and 30%, we started saying, okay, what does it look like for the time of the year where you're under 40% occupied, that red bar? 41 to 70% occupied is the yellow bar. 71 to 100% occupied is the green bar. And you can see summer and fall, we've got a number of properties that are falling into that category. That yellow is pretty consistent throughout the year. And then we have this enormous spike in January, February, and to a certain degree in March and April, where we're under 40% occupied. If I'm in the accommodation sector and I see that we have a consistent 70% or more lodging occupancy, it's time to build. Because the business is there and we're not taking care of all the business that we have. If I'm in the 40 to 70%, it's time to stay level. Let's not add more to the inventory. If I'm below 40%, I'm going to have business closing. And right now, we're definitely not in the build time. We're probably in a stabilized time, but we have some businesses at risk. We took one more step forward and said, okay, if we average this out, what does it look like? You can see January and February, on an average across all of those responses, around a 33% occupancy rate, shooting up to a high of 71% in July and August. And again, this is to give us a picture. We had the county's lodging tax manager here for the earlier session, and he looked at this and he goes, that almost matches what I see in terms of the numbers we have. And I was like, wow, that's great. This says we've got some improvements to make for the off-season, and we need those improvements for certain. But we also need to somehow stabilize that peak season time period so it's not as peak and valley as it is. And it's not saying we need we don't need summer growth, we don't need fall growth, but we need to be really putting some emphasis on November, December, January, February, March, and April. So we asked it a little differently, and you see this, we took that line and put it against a question that we asked all of our stakeholders. Do we have, from your perspective, do we have too few visitors, too many visitors, or about the right number of visitors? 56% said in the wintertime we have too few. We've got needs that we really need some help on. However, if we look at how that changes, 26% of our stakeholders said we've got too many visitors in the summertime. No one's going to disagree with that. But if you look at the consistency of the light blue line, 56% in the summer or in the spring, 55% in the summer, 53% in the fall, said it's about the right number. And they're looking at this not just as a weekend piece, they're looking at it across the days of the week. Businesses are always going to say, we've got some opportunities to grow. The amount that are saying we've got about the right number, let's see what we can do to sustain that. That's telling us there's something going on here. And when we compare it to the occupancy rates, it matches up pretty well. We asked this question, we want to pull out for what are our accommodations thinking in terms of this right number of visitors. 75%, 76%, I told you I couldn't see these, 76% of our accommodations felt like we have too few visitors in the winter. But 70% said we've got about the right number in the summer. And it shifts, even during the fall, 63% said about the right number. So it gives us a sense of where does our focus need to be. It's one of the recommendations that we made. Put the emphasis on off-peak, put the emphasis on non-weekend days. And it's an opportunity for there to be more consistency in our business models. All of that rolls into lodging tax and sales tax collections. And we've got some data that we're going to, I mentioned that we're going to update some of the information in this because we've got some data that can take this back more historically and give you a projection of how this has changed over the years. So let's get into the resident survey. And we showed a little bit about this yesterday, and I want to move through a few of these really quickly because they are tough to read. But we had 732 responses. We gave people the option to respond online as well as in paper. So we really wanted to encourage as much response rate as we could get. We asked our residents, we know the visitor economy affects our community in different ways. Please indicate your level of agreement with these following statements. And I'm going to jump forward because we're going to show this in a different way. Those green bars are those individuals who said, I strongly agree with that statement, or I agree with that statement. And the red and orange lines are I strongly disagree with that, or I disagree with it. And those questions fell into two different categories. Some of those had to do with negative impacts, and some of them had to do with positive impacts. In terms of the negative impact questions, I'll give you an example of one of those. Rapid tourism growth is damaging the environment and burdening our first responders. You see how long that dark green line is? There was strong agreement to that statement. We asked some different questions in terms of what are some of the positive impacts of tourism. That residents have more places to go, events, dining options, etc. because of tourism. That's the fourth one down. Relatively strong disagreement. The orange line is in terms of disagree. I disagree. Our residents aren't necessarily feeling that tourism is benefiting this community. But there is some agreement with that. You can see the green bars are there too. So let's break it down a little bit further. We asked our stakeholders the exact same question. So stakeholders got the same 3 questions that our residents got, because we wanted to see what's the comparison here. And you see the green bars are a lot longer for our stakeholders. They're seeing this from a different perspective. They also are seeing those benefits more directly. So we put it into a different chart to show side by side what's the agreement of our stakeholders and how does that compare to the agreement of our residents. When we asked the question, tourists add congestion, traffic safety, and parking problems in the Hocking Hills, 90% of our residents said, I agree with that statement, that's happening. Our businesses said the same thing. 70% of our businesses said, yeah, I agree with that, that's happening out there too. But then the numbers started to really shift into differences. The growth in tourism and the popularity of the Hocking Hills area are causing prices to rise, making things less affordable for residents. 85% of our residents agreed with that statement. 50% of our tourism stakeholders did. The rapid growth of tourism is damaging our natural environment and places undue burden on ambulance, public safety, and fire first responders. 85% of our residents agreed with that. 50% of our stakeholders. Poor behavior by tourists has caused increased crime, noise levels, and disruptions in residential areas. 70% of our residents agreed with that. Only 35% of our stakeholders did. They're seeing things differently. Some of our stakeholders aren't close to that. And you're going to see some evidence of why that may have been as low as it was in that regard. And then it starts to shift. When we start to getting into some of the positive impacts of tourism, there's a little bit of a shift there. But you can see there's still some agreement that's happening between our stakeholders and our residents. Without revenue from tourists, some locally owned businesses could not stay open. 85% of our stakeholders said, yes, that's true. 60% of our residents said, yes, that's true. But 30% of our residents said, I don't agree with that statement at all. Visitor activity encourages new businesses to the area and provides job opportunities for residents. Our stakeholders said, 85% of them said, I agree with that statement. But only 50% of our residents did. And 32% said, I don't agree with that statement at all. And you can see the numbers just keep going from that. We highlighted 5 things in green because they actually fit within the purview of Hocking Hills Tourism Association. And yesterday you heard me talk about there are clear goals for Hocking Hills Tourism Association through this destination stewardship plan, but there are also goals that are completely beyond their span of control, their span of management, and they can help influence it, but it's outside of their ability to accomplish. Those items that are highlighted in green are within their ability to address through programming and investments.
Question.
Yeah.
Back up a minute. What's the percentages off to the side here in red?
Those are disagree.
Just
Yeah, so For those, they were strong disagreement, and we wanted to just show that so that it was reflected there. We asked our residents, what are the top 3 issues that need to be addressed if we're going to be a rewarding place to live and to visit? And there were 2 that went off the chart on this. So that this is a pre-formed list. They had to choose among that list. The 2 that they chose most often: place limits on the development of tourism businesses, identify ways to ensure that tourists pay their fair share for the stress they place on our infrastructure. This is our residents saying, we're feeling the pain of what is going on here, and we need some help addressing some of these, and this is the way we feel like is the best way to approach it. We also asked our residents, and this was open-ended, so the responses that you're going to see are themed. We've kind of categorized those different responses. What's the one thing you'd want the Hocking Hills Tourism Association to consider as they're building in this case we're calling it the Tourism Stewardship Plan. We switched that over to say this is not about tourism, it's about the whole destination. It's a destination stewardship plan. But again, those 2 strong themes: manage development, place resident needs first. And those are, you start seeing why we started making some of the recommendations that came out through the plan when we start seeing some of these responses. Final question that we put in front of our residents are, how long have you lived in the Hocking Hills area? 78% said I've lived here more than 15 years. Only 6% said I've lived here between 1 and 5 years. Again, it's another indicator of our housing affordability being out of whack. It's hard to move here if I can't find a place to live. Now, this is one area where I'm still amazed by this figure. If we asked most communities, have you heard of your destination organization? They're going to say, I didn't know we had one. Roughly 90% of our residents said, I am either very familiar or somewhat familiar with the Hocking Hills Tourism Association. That's amazing. I don't see that in almost anywhere we work. Again, our stakeholder results, we had 153 responses. 54 of those responses were from accommodations. And again, I separated that because that number of accommodations was such a, 36% was a high level of respondents for this. We asked them, where's your business located? In terms of all stakeholders, 43% in Logan, 37% in Hocking County, but outside of Logan, and then a smattering of those in other, even in some of our adjacent counties. And some of them were even elsewhere. I'm not sure what that means. We asked our accommodations, where are you located? 30% were in Logan, 57% in Hocking County, but outside of Logan. Yes?
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
This keeps coming up, but I live here now, but I work in real estate in Columbus and Logan. And Ohio is so fast growing in population. There are places that none of you would ever want to live in Columbus because it's so crime-ridden and the schools are so horrible that you're paying $250,000 to $300,000 just to get a house there. So it's not just Logan where the price is going up and because it's a tourist. You can't even move into Linden unless you're spending $200,000. And there's not a whole lot of people that want to live in Linden. So Ohio is growing. I've had clients that bought a house and 2 years later sold it almost double. And it was Columbus City schools and not a great area. So in all of Ohio, don't get so upset about the tourists because it's all of Ohio. All of the pricing of housing is going up and the rent is going up, and that's why people are buying them as rentals and then having them to rent out because people are just moving here in groves, and the closer you are to Columbus, the more that it's going up.
I appreciate you saying that, and I'll add to that. We do have a very specific challenge in Hocking County, but housing affordability, I feel like I got to do the math on this. We're working in at least 12 different communities. It's the top issue in all 12 communities. And they're not all destination communities. Some of them are places like Lubbock, Texas. They're not suffering from an over-tourism standpoint. The entire state of Rhode Island, these are places that real estate's just gone out of control. And it changed so quickly that we've had no way to prepare for that change. Let me jump forward. How long have you been operating? So you remember the piece we had such a high percentage said, I've seen my business decline from 2023 to 2022, or 2022 to 2023. One of the reasons they saw that decline is we have a large percentage of those accommodation operators that have only been in business between 1 and 5 years. They have no historical connection to what were the trends pre-pandemic, because they changed so dramatically post-pandemic. And that's what my comparisons are to. If I have only been operating for 3 years or 2 years, my comparison is to a staggering figure, not necessarily the past history. If I'm budgeting for a business in tourism, I'm always, until a few more years go by, my comparison year is 2019. But if I wasn't operating in 2019, I don't have that comparison. And I don't know what that was like. And I may not be talking to some of my neighbors who were operating then to get a sense of what was it like before everyone started coming here. I will say, if you focus also on the number of businesses, stakeholders, and accommodations that have been open for and operating for more than 15 years, it's a really good rate. You've got some long-standing legacy businesses here. We did want to find out who are these different organizations that are in this stakeholder list. And you do see 36% of those respondents came from the accommodation sector. 11% were in food and beverage. 8% were some type of civic or government entity. 7% retail and shopping, 7% arts and creative, and you can see the list goes down. 13% recognize themselves as other. I don't see me in that list, so I'm going to tell you what I am, and there was an open-ended part of that. I'm a wedding venue, I'm a church, I'm a locksmith, I'm the Fraternal Order of Eagles. Again, wide range of responses within this mix. We asked those stakeholders, what's your role or your job in that organization? 68% identified as the owner, 18% as the manager, 6% as employees, and other is 8%. If I'm a church, I'm not necessarily thinking of myself as a manager or an owner. So, there's that other category for that too. 60% of the respondents overall were residents of Hocking County. So that means 40% of these stakeholders live somewhere else. But it's even higher from the accommodation standpoint. 35% of our accommodations said they were a resident of this area. 65% said they were non-resident. If we go back and think about those differences between what our residents said and what our stakeholders said, if I'm not living here as an accommodation provider, I don't have that same sense of knowledge of what's going on here. And that means we've got to educate some of that. If there are problems, and if there are problems happening, our accommodations providers need to understand that those problems are challenges that are creating more and more challenges for others. And they're respectful of that. We had a great conversation yesterday about with some individuals who live elsewhere, have accommodation businesses here, and are on top of the way their properties are being managed, to the point that they're even putting noise control devices into their properties. We also asked our businesses, what's concerning you about the next 12 months? And the number one answer across all of the different stakeholders was the rising cost of supplies. Number two answer, again, this was January, this was right after property tax assessments were released. Increases in property taxes was number 2. But the top response from our accommodation sector was resident sentiment and attitudes towards tourism. So there's some concern there. It was number 3 overall. Revenue shortfall, second, or not the top one, I'm sorry. Top one was staff reliability and work ethic from our accommodations perspective, followed by a decrease in visitors or business revenue. I'm concerned about that revenue picture. And then the third was resident sentiment and attitude towards tourism. We did include some others. I'm not going to go into this because it's all across the board, including talking about some of our trees. But it's in your packet, so if you do want to dive into the other category, please feel free to. In terms of familiarity with Hocking Hills Tourism Association, there's pretty strong familiarity with the marketing programs of the Hocking Hills Tourism Association. That number is about 95%. It's an enormous number. But it drops in terms of familiarity with destination stewardship efforts. So it's another one of those indicators that we've got to communicate some of these efforts a lot more thoroughly, a lot more consistently. The wheels are falling off the bus, everybody. So it's part of that communication challenges that we really got to go through. In terms of priorities that the stakeholders should have of Hocking Hills Tourism Association, the number 1 was establish tourism stewardship priorities and programs to protect our natural resources, strengthen the charm and appeal of downtown Logan. Our accommodation sector felt a little differently. They said continue to focus, 56% said continue to focus on growing overnight visitors to the area. They're the ones who are seeing these peaks and valleys and saying, I'm not sure what this looks like because our highs are really high and our lows are low. Finally, the one that really jumped out as interesting to me was 35% of our accommodations said we want Hocking Hills Tourism Association to help us continue to develop new or enhance existing visitor experiences, create some of those options that get people out of the state park and out of those congested areas because they have some other alternatives in the area. We give them an other category as well, so you can fill in the blanks here. When we start seeing a lot of things that are outside the span of control of Hocking Hills Tourism Association, that tells us it's a bigger problem. And again, it's one of those reasons that we identified goals beyond Hocking Hills Tourism Association, and we encourage that collaboration to start really addressing and moving things forward on all those different issues. We're reaching the end. We're almost there. In terms of issues to address, what are the 3 most important issues that need to be addressed to ensure the Hocking Hills area remains a rewarding place to live and visit? This was a lot more across the board. In fact, some real strong differences between our overall stakeholders and our accommodation stakeholders. As our overall stakeholders, 47% of them said, as a community, I want to please identify ways to ensure that tourists pay their fair share for any stress they place on our infrastructure. We heard the same thing from our residents. So there's discontentment out there. Only 11% of our accommodation sector, and if you think about the taxes that are generated from our travelers, the lodging properties are charging that fee. They're the ones who pass that along to the customers that pay that. The next one down is engage community members around the policies that balance local landowner property use and preserve the area's natural resources. 44% of our overall stakeholders said this is a priority. Only 33% of our accommodation sector said it was. Again, there's a little disconnect that's there. Upgrade road networks was relatively high for both groups. But educate guests on how to visit our area's natural attractions responsibly. 50% of our accommodations said please make certain that's one of the most important issues you put some time and energy on. That's our accommodation sector saying this. Protect the product that brings people to the area. What's the one thing that we want Hocking Hills Tourism Association to consider as they're building this plan? This group was much more specific, identifying one key item and then a number of other items that kind of fell together. Support local businesses and support property owners. We need to know how to do business better, and Hocking Hills Tourism Association can help us. And then put some transparency into bed tax use, the education of not what we're doing with it, but how we're doing it. And it's one of those communication factors that has to be a part of this going forward. In a snapshot, business concerns over the next 12 months, there's one of those, out of the top 3, there's one of those that really falls within Hocking Hills Tourism Association's purview. I'm not sure what we do about rising costs of supplies. That's inflation. That's been happening everywhere. But certainly increases in property taxes is an entirely different issue. In terms of priorities for Hocking Hills Tourism Association specifically, there are 3 that we can definitely do some things with. Establishing tourism stewardship priorities and programs, protect quality of life in the Hocking Hills. I think we've got a path forward on that. Now we just have to do it. Strengthen the charm and appeal of downtown Logan. We've done some great work on that, but there's more collaboration that can happen. And build local awareness of the value of tourism. There are stakeholders saying we want to see some of that. That's communications, but it's constant communications, and it's recognizing we're not going to be 100% successful, but if we're 5, 10, 20% successful, that's a change. And we can get people involved and really helping us move our things forward. With that, that's a lot of information. I am impressed that all of you stayed awake through this. We'll take any questions you have. Yeah.
I've learned since the last time that I came, when we had this first meeting months ago, I wasn't a resident yet. Now I'm a resident. So I was living in Columbus and running a short-term rental. Now that I live here, I realize what some of the residents were saying about some of the places here are just not affordable for us to utilize some of the restaurants. And there's restaurants that I would not take my kids to because I feel like I can't afford it. But I can see where they stay in the business because that's the only place that maybe the tourists would come to. So like Linda and Sue and Carrie that own the Hocking Hills Coffee Emporium, they give discounts to locals, a loyalty discount, which makes it more affordable. And so maybe if, I know these businesses are seeing the slump during the week when they get the peak with the tourists. So maybe like Millstone Barbecue, I believe it's like Wednesday nights, they have a thing where with an adult entry you get a kid for free or something. Maybe what some of the local businesses that are higher priced can do for the locals to create that, that unity is maybe there's a certain day of the week where they don't get any tourists coming. I think typically with restaurants, Mondays is like not a great day for restaurants. Maybe they can do something with the residents, like they can discount those days. You show your ID that you are a local resident, and maybe they give discounts on those nights. That will help them keep their income coming in for the restaurant, and it'll help the locals feel like, we're getting something back, right? In exchange for the heavy tourism. So I feel like that could be a place that we could work on that. And then I noticed, I went to Joshua Tree in California in January, and they did have the, where you have to pay to utilize their state parks. There was like a discount if you stayed for longer. And then I feel like probably in these meetings we're realizing a lot of our day trippers probably eating before they get here, utilizing our parks, filling up our parking lots, and then going back home and potentially not spending any money in Hocking County at all. Are they talking about potentially starting to do something like that? Because I know you said we're one of the few states that they do that in.
They're not. And my understanding is it's off the table.
Yeah.
and has been off the table for a number of years. So if that's going to be the case, then we've got to look for other ways to address the challenge. If the state's not willing to have that conversation, or even treat Hocking Hills State Park differently from some of the other state parks, just in terms of volume and the stress that it's putting on your community, I do think there's an opportunity to continue that conversation. We don't have to necessarily take no for an answer. Administrations change. So at some point, does that change give us an inroad to make progress on this particular issue? But it starts with building a story of multiple voices saying, we need help.
Maybe we kind of do some sort of marketing like weekday travelers from Columbus. Okay, so they could come here after work, and then they could leave at checkout and get back to Columbus and just go straight to their office. So maybe that could be a way to increase the day trippers, certain days of the week, but allow them some sort of in-state discount maybe, and then on lodging and maybe food to get that.
You said you actually said some great things last night in terms of kind of, it's not a matter of the product at this point. It's a matter of the audiences that we can target that can help us with that consistency and sustainable level of business. So I think that's fully accurate. It matches a number of the thoughts that are in the plan, but it's that next step of how do we now take that into implementation? And that, I think that's where the association's got some momentum to really start helping move forward on those changes.
I'd just like to say that the state park out there at Old Man's Cave, the lodge itself has a beautification fee, and that is on the food and the lodge, and that goes for the upkeep of Old Man's Cave only.
That's good. I've not heard anyone say that yet, so that's good.
I asked about it.
That's good.
It wasn't a whole lot, but on my bill, I think it was 45 cents.
And the lodge is a nice addition into this area.
Just for Old Man's Cave, they said.
Good. Yes.
I wasn't here for the session where you explained the plan. How well do the various entities in Hocking County communicate with each other and problem solve together?
Right now, there's a lot of barriers. The question was, currently, how well do all of the various organizations communicate together and problem solve together? There are some efforts that are positive right now on that. One of the strengths that we recognize is this community has a willingness to work together. And in a community that is starting to fray at the edges because of tourism, it creates these disconnects. And what we often see, in Sedona is a great example of that, the government entity stops talking because all they hear is everything negative. The residents only talk about the problems. I'm fed up with the trash, the noise, the traffic is out of control. The businesses are out there just trying to stay afloat on all of this. So all of those entities stop talking at times. You haven't gotten to that point. You're potentially close, though. So part of this is really beginning to convene opportunities to get those different voices around the table. Residents, stakeholders, government, the state, it's got to come together. And, Sandra, yesterday you said some great things about, we need to really understand what those challenges are. As the county, we need to understand what some of those challenges are because we want to help. But right now all that we hear is negative, and we're focused on how are we managing what we're doing right now. So problem solving kind of gets kicked down the road a little bit. And that's where having some focus on this and narrowing down the list. Yesterday we showed a list of areas of concern. It was a long list. We can't do it all. but we can start really working on those pieces. So one of those pieces, if it's land regulation or zoning, we're going through that process of really learning about that right now. The county's building a system that gets input. So it's not just making a knee-jerk reaction to that, because right now we can still have huge growth in terms of short-term rentals because we have no way to control that.
I would just like to say the commissioners is always in this discussion. I'm speaking on behalf of the commissioners here. As an example, we worked with the Lake Logan people that's working on that problem out there. We've worked with them. We have worked with tourism in any way that we can. Our hands is tied for a lot of things that people would like for us to do, but we're always willing to listen, to learn, and to do what we can. Am I correct, Jason?
Is there a coalition that's formalized that brings everyone together in a consistent way, that has a stakeholder from each group that has a seat at the leadership table and decision-making capability?
No, we do not.
It's one of the recommendations.
That is, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
But it's a recommendation. I may be wrong on this. We aren't proposing it needs to be a formally incorporated entity. It needs to be everyone sitting around the table and saying, okay, what are the problems that we're dealing with? Let's not focus on the problems. Let's focus on
Just a scheduled monthly.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be.
incorporated. Yeah.
We could always appoint one commissioner, only one commissioner could go to that.
Yeah.
This was a public meeting today, so Jason and I are both here. But it would have to be, we could appoint one commissioner to go.
Or you could rotate, so each commissioner had the
That,
opportunity to hear
if
from a
that
variety
was
of
what
stakeholders.
you would be considered a board, if that's what you wish, that's what we would do. I think Jason will agree with me.
I think based upon what we've seen by how the season works, I think this is a great idea, and we could really focus on creating this group, and this could be something we could do in a less busy time of the year, because I think if you start it during like this season right now, your destinations, your accommodations, everybody is going to be so busy, they're not going to have time to participate. But I think it's I think we could really convene something for like after October, and then maybe meet once or twice during the busy season.
You're fully accurate. In fact, we talked a little bit about that yesterday, that we're getting ready to go into cuckoo season. Let's acknowledge that our businesses are going to be out of touch for that, but we still have momentum that we need to build on with that, and it gives us a chance. So one of the recommendations in terms of real dirty details are some toolkits to help with some of this action, some of the education that's necessary on how do we move our way out of this. Being able to create some of those toolkits over the next few months in preparation for that real convening, and using that as a way to get started. It also gives us a way to if that convening brings out 60 or 90 people, that gives us 60 or 90 people that we can focus in different ways. So we're not all trying to work on the same problem. Now it gives us a way to really spread our solutions across multiple bodies and minds. And that's one of the things we need. Thank you very much for being a part of this. Thank you for your patience as we've worked through this process, and your attentiveness today. This was great. And I'll hand it back over to Karen.
Well, I think I would just echo what David said. Thank you very much for being here. We appreciate your time. We know how busy everyone is. We will be working on several things during the busy season, internally, understanding, as Marty pointed out, that trying to convene a group during peak season is somewhat futile. However, developing toolkits and getting communication pieces put together is certainly something that is doable. So again, thank you so much. Hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day.